2 years ago, I moved into an apartment with three close friends of mine. One of them, Nico, grew up watching a little known show called One Piece. Over time, I was convinced into starting this long journey. At the time of recording, I have just finished catching up to the anime to experience the end of Wano as it comes out. My family and friends are beyond annoyed listening to me talk about this series, so here's a breakdown of my experience with One Piece. Before going into Romance Dawn, there are a few things I want to say. I hated the idea of watching this show. It was too long and I thought the designs were weird. However, I wish I knew how much I would fall in love with the series when I first started reading it. And yes, I read it. I did not watch the anime. Well, kinda. I read all the way up until Dressrosa, then I watched Dressrosa, and then read until I was halfway through Wano, and then I watched until weekly release. Back to what I was saying. I went into Romance Dawn with the alright, let's get this over with mindset, when I should have been looking at it with more wonder. Because as I start to finish the show, I find myself wishing it wasn't approaching its final saga. Originally, I didn't care much for everything that was happening. I didn't care about Kid Luffy because I just wanted to get to the story already. However, my interest peaked a bit when one of Shanks' men shot a guy in the head. Shanks' speech was also really cool. I assumed the show would be more childish due to the weird art style, so straight up executing a homie in the first chapter definitely changed my opinion of the tone. At this point, I was interested but not sold. I liked Shanks, I thought he was a badass, but I wasn't sold on Luffy just yet. Recently, my mom asked me to start watching the anime with her from the beginning. To my surprise, the show starts at a different spot. The Shanks stuff doesn't happen first. I personally don't like this. I think that Luffy meeting Kobe and the Alvida stuff is really enjoyable, but the Shanks meeting is way better. I don't think the Alvida stuff would have had me as interested in the series as Shanks' crew. Regardless of the adaptation, the Zoro meeting is amazing. Both are incredible. I really enjoy the way that Luffy earns the friendship of Zoro just by being himself. Also, on rewatch, I love when Luffy decides that Zoro was a swordsman without Zoro's permission, this being something that Luffy does repeatedly throughout the show. Initially, when I read this bit, I liked Zoro, was starting to get sold on Luffy. Also, for some reason, on my first read, I really hated the Marine storyline. I didn't care about the corrupt government stuff until about Water 7. I don't know why. It's one of my favorite parts now, but 2 years ago I just couldn't give a shit. In this arc, we get introduced to a very important character, Buggy. No, seriously, Buggy is way more important than you realize. But obviously I mean Nami, who becomes the navigator for Luffy and Zoro. I don't really have a lot to say about this arc. I think it's funny how strong Buggy can be but isn't. I actually love Buggy. I think his character is funny even today. And that hasn't changed from whenever I first started reading it. I think it's awesome that he was on Roger's crew and was friends with Shanks. I enjoyed the dog in this arc. That storyline is pretty cool. Nami was someone I didn't like right away. I didn't dislike her, but I wasn't sold on her just yet. By this point, I'm fully sold on Luffy, and I was sold on Zoro from the start, obviously. I don't like this arc. This is one of my least favorite arcs. I didn't like Usopp, and it took me a very long time to even start to like him, and I didn't like the villains of this arc. The best part were Zoro and Luffy getting lost. I thought that was funny. Nothing changed on a reread. I still find it hard to enjoy this version of Usopp. Maybe it's just because his jokes don't land for me when most of the other comedy in the show does. The bad guys are just nothing. The cats that fought Zoro just made me sad, and Captain Kuro is embarrassing for how smart he claims to be. It just went on too long. But hey, could be worse. I have one thing to add before moving on to the next arc. It's actually a compliment. Well, kinda. I think the anime adaptation of meeting Usopp is way better than the mangas. I'm not sure if it's a common opinion or not, but Usopp attempting to fool them the way he did in the anime is more charming to me in my opinion. And I think Luffy immediately mentioning Yasopp makes more sense for his character. I love Luffy, and one thing I love about his character is that he doesn't think. Whatever comes to his head first is what he says or does. That's why I think it makes more sense for Luffy to do what he did in the anime. The second Luffy would have heard Usopp's name, he would have immediately made the connection and said something. It doesn't make sense for him to save that information until Usopp is upset. This might be a common opinion, but I thought I might put it out there. I love this arc. It is probably in my top 5 favorite arcs in One Piece. I lost my mind whenever I read it for the first time. I don't know if it was just because of how bad the last arc was, or because I naturally had low expectations for the show, but this arc is the one that guaranteed I would finish the series. It has literally everything a great One Piece arc needs: an amazing new Straw Hat, a sad backstory that's better in the manga, a surprising character reveal, and a big twist. I could end there, but there's a lot of specifics I want to talk about. As for Sanji, I was sold on him from the start, but unlike Zoro, Sanji's quirk is one I'm not too fond of. The perv character is not my favorite. I love Sanji's chivalry, but the swooning part just doesn't resonate with me. That part of his character is redeemed a bit with his English dub, in my opinion. The way he yells, "Nami Swan!" is actually pretty funny, but reading it just doesn't hit right. His backstory is great, and one of the reasons I immediately love the character. Zeph chopping off his legs and eating them so that Sanji could have the bag of food is something I definitely wasn't expecting whenever starting the series. I'm aware that this didn't happen in the anime, but I believe that the version I stated is much better than the one in the anime. Not that it matters in that either way are possible, because Zeph would have bled out either way. Regardless, a very strong backstory for both characters. The Don himself wasn't anything to run home the mom about, but he is there to introduce Mihawk. The fact that he was so bored that he chased this loser all the way from the Grand Line, that's just so badass. In addition, Zoro's fight with Mihawk is one of my favorite moments in the series. It firmly showed the distance Zoro had to travel. Seeing someone this powerful fight this early on in the story was mind-blowing to me. In addition, Zoro's declaration and Luffy's reaction is just so perfect. Nami stealing the Mary was something I wasn't expecting at all. She is a thief, so I guess I just was underestimating her at the time, but it was weird because I almost felt betrayed that she did that. I was really enjoying the crew minus Usopp, so it made me a bit upset that Nami stole the ship because I kind of knew they would forgive her and she would join back. At the time, I wasn't gonna forgive her. I was pissed, but in like a good way. I didn't know what was going on, and I was really interested in how things were going to play out. Which leads me to, how the hell did I not know that Jinbei was talked about in this arc? That's super cool stuff. So I don't really get the hype behind this arc. I mean, like, I get it. This arc has 100% sold me on Nami. I forgave her for stealing the Mary, and I really cared for her because of her backstory and, the scene. It's just that I enjoyed Baratier so much and heard previous stuff that Arlong Park was amazing. So I had really high expectations. And I'm not saying I don't enjoy it. I love this arc, but I personally like Baratier more. Nami being redeemed was the best part of the arc, and I really enjoyed the fishmen and how they were handled. I don't know. I can't quite put it into words. I like this arc, but I don't love it. And I kind of feel the same when I reread. I am very hesitantly excited to see this arc, in specific, brought to life in the live action on Netflix. I also really enjoy the Kobe cover story, too. I love that stuff. Logtown is a nice short arc after Baratier and Arlong Park. Luffy gets his first bounty, which is followed by some fun reactions to said bounty. We get introduced to some cool characters like Sendai Kentetsu and Dragon. And we get to see Buggy again! Hell yeah. I also love that Luffy almost died and was completely fine with it. His character's so awesome. I really love him. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but I would like to talk a little bit more about the live action adaptation. I personally think it looks incredible. My brother sent me the full trailer, and we both are incredibly excited for it. Oda has been a huge part of this adaptation, which gives me a lot of hope for it. I'm also very excited to see the changes they made to the story. It looks like Garp is at Roger's execution, which is super cool in my opinion. Another interesting thing is that it looks like Arlong went to Baratier. As you guys know, I really like this arc, so I'm super interested in seeing how it changed. I think Mihawk looks awesome too. I don't know if I'll continue making these. It depends on how I feel and if this goes well. I don't know. If there are shows you guys want me to watch and review, just let me know. Check out my podcast, which is also on this channel and on Spotify. Uh, Thank you for watching. Subscribe.